Welcome back. I am so excited that you have joined me again in the Aligned Womb, Aligned You podcast. I'm Kate Nagai, and I am your host and womb guide on this journey. I'm here to help you to lean into the language of your menstrual cycle so that you can align yourself and awaken and activate to your womb wisdom to live the most inspired life. I am so excited to jump into this episode and to dive into today's topic. So let's get started. So let's get into this week's topic, which I was fired up, to be honest. I was so fired up to share this topic with you. It wasn't one that I had planned, but after I interviewed Jamie, there was so much bubbling inside of me that I was like, I got to get this out. We've got to start talking about this because this is an important message and I don't want to miss the opportunity. So Jamie's interview last week was amazing. I loved hearing her story. And I really loved how open she was about sharing some of her experiences that she has met with the medical community and with being diagnosed with endometriosis and some of the fight that she had to do to advocate for herself and what it is that she wanted. The reason why this really resonated with me is that this isn't the first time I've heard this story. I've heard it from so many different women with so many different conditions on so many different levels. And it always creates rage in me knowing that we're not being heard by the people that we put into the authority positions that we trust and we rely on to fix us. But going even deeper than that, which we're going to get into today, is how that first stepping stone or that first rock thrown into the pond of women being silenced, how that has kind of helped to build and create the sisterhood wound that we as women are also now inflicting upon other women without even knowing sometimes that we're doing it, or maybe that we're aware of it, but we don't know why. Where is this coming from? Why do we feel this way? And it is because it has been taught to us, or we've heard it from others, which has left an imprint in our subconscious that in some way women are fakers, or women are exaggerators, or women are lazy, or women just want an out, or that we in some way are insufficient or broken. And I share a lot about this feeling of being broken in my fertility journey because that was the catalyst that really made me understand my body in a different way. When I had my second ectopic pregnancy, that was when I met with the fertility clinic because obviously there was something more going on than what was expected because I had now 2 consecutive ectopic pregnancies. And I remember going in there and without doing any testing, without having any visual of understanding what was going on in my fallopian tubes, I was told in that meeting that because I had 2 ectopic pregnancies, the chances of me ever getting pregnant successfully on my own would be pretty slim to none, and that my best course of action was to have my remaining fallopian tube removed and then just go straight to IVF, because without any fallopian tubes, the egg couldn't implant into them. Therefore, that would resolve that problem. But that also meant that I would never be able to have kids naturally, that I would always have to rely on an IVF clinic in order to achieve pregnancy, which could potentially mean that I would only ever have one child, which was not in my vision, my dreams. And I remember walking out of that appointment going, I walked in feeling broken. I came here hoping that you would give me hope. And all you could tell me was that it was time to remove body parts. I am so thankful that something in my body, in my psyche, wherever it was coming from, said, no, hold on. This isn't right. We don't just remove body parts without investigating more. And because I felt so disappointed and let down by the medical community, that was the first turning point that I was like, you know what? This isn't right. I am going to go look for alternative practitioners. And at this point, I had never done anything alternative in my life besides massage therapy. I had never seen an acupuncturist, never seen a naturopathic doctor. I had never explored anything that was alternative medicine. For me, growing up in a small town, medicine was authority, and authority was what you followed. So this was a big jump and a leap for me, but it was also the big jump and leap that allowed me to completely understand my body in a different way, and then kept that curiosity, that spark of always inquiring what's going on with myself that led me to where I am now. 9 years ago, 10 years ago, I would have never guessed that this is where I'd be right now, and this is what I'd be talking about, and this is what I would be excited about. But because I was forced to look at my body in a different way, I was given this pause, this moment of reflection of going, which road do I want to take? And I got curious. I learned so much more, and it blew my mind. And through blowing my mind, I ended up meeting so many other women that were going through different stories, but same journey, being told the same thing over and over again. And then the more I heard that, the more I started to see a reflection of myself and how I was showing up in my life and what I was saying, or maybe not even saying out loud, but in my head saying about other women and how they were showing up in their lives, how critical I was being of menstrual pain or of women's moodiness, how much I was buying into this culture that is very prevalent that we live in modern society. So much so that a week before my wedding, I had my third ectopic pregnancy. Our wedding was out of town, and we were driving to the wedding. And I'd already taken the medicine to be able to abort the pregnancy, so we caught it in time that I wasn't going to have any damage to the tube, hopefully. And as we were driving to my wedding, an hour out of the city, I was in intense pelvic pain, like so much so that I thought I was going to pass out. We opened up the windows to let the breeze hit me. I turned white as a ghost. I could barely breathe. I was in such deep shock that we immediately went to the local hospital that was on the way. Thank God it was only 10 minutes from when I started to go into this intense pain. And when they rushed me into Emerge, they thought because I had just been treated for an ectopic pregnancy a week beforehand, that the medication didn't work and that I was probably rupturing an internal bleeding, or had internal bleeding, sorry. And so I spent hours in Emerge doing emergency ultrasounds to only find out that I had an ovarian cyst that ruptured and was leaking gray matter into my abdominal core, which had made me swollen so much that I looked like I was 3 months pregnant. So they put me on painkillers, sent me on my way after I had requested, because I needed to get to my wedding for the next day. But the ladies that treated me in that hospital were absolutely mind-blowing amazing. They understood my stress. They understood my worry. They understood what it was that I was panicked about because I needed to get to my wedding. And they alerted the local hospital where we were going to have our wedding at to say, if this woman goes through more pain and comes in, like, you got to treat it as an emergency. So like they red alerted everyone, and thank God I never had to go back to the hospital after that. Everything worked itself out. But the reason why I share this story is because the very next day at my wedding, only our family knew what happened, because we obviously didn't show up for supper that night because we were in Emerge. But the rest of our friends and the rest of our extended family, none of them had an idea what was going on. And instead, I took my painkillers. I put on a tight corset to suck in my belly. And I pretended like everything was normal at my wedding. And we just went through the whole event with me being in pain, with my sister-in-law, who was a nurse, checking in on me to making sure I was okay. But we never shared what I was going through. We never shared the fear that my husband and I both went through the night before. We just moved through silence through the event. And when I reflect upon that, I just think I can't believe that I did that. I can't believe that I felt like I couldn't share my truth to the people that were there celebrating me. It wasn't because I needed to keep it a secret. Some of it was I didn't know how to talk about infertility. Some of it was that there was shame. A lot of it was because it was my reproductive organs. Like, who the hell really wants to talk about this in the public? So much of it was ingrained messaging that has been put in my head from society. It wasn't really what I wanted. Instead, I just did what I had to. And, as I was thinking about this for this episode, it made me think even further back in history when I was in a serious relationship, not with my husband, with somebody else. And I ended up having to go to the hospital because of incredibly bad, painful menstrual pain. And I needed him to drop me off. And he said to me, "Is this real? Because I feel like you're just seeking attention, and this is what my stepmom does." And, it's these stories. It's the story of me having an ovarian cyst rupture and not being able to sleep and being in intense pain, me having menstrual pain and being asked if I'm just seeking attention. It is the stories that Jamie shared in her interview of a doctor telling her that she's being punished for not having kids and no one believing her for 20 years of how bad the pain is. These are the stories that us women are going through and not talking about. And I was recently reading this book called Hormone Intelligence by Dr. Aveva Rome. She writes in her book, and I was so inspired by this, was that she says that 96% of the symptoms and conditions that we face as women will take the form of what is called the invisible illness. To the world, we look fine, while we silently deal with the symptoms that steal our energy, sap our joy, and make us feel self-conscious and keep us from living our big, beautiful life to the fullest. And this is really what's happening while we are silencing ourselves. And as I continued to read, this was all in the first chapter of her book, and I was just my mind was being blown. But some really important stats that she shares that I want to share with you before we get into this topic of the sisterhood wound, which really the sisterhood wound is all of this weaving into our maybe distorted lens or expectations of ourselves and of other women. So here are some other really, I think, potent and powerful stats that she shares in her book. Medical conditions that uniquely affect more than half of all humans, which are women, are consistently the least prioritized, least funding areas of research every single year. In a 2010 study, it reported that healthcare professionals are more likely to dismiss women's pain reports as being emotional, psychogenic, hysterical, or oversensitive, and therefore not real. This is leading to more frequent mental health diagnoses than true mental health diagnoses. So we're starting to blame our hormones, we're begrudging our monthly cycles, and we're doing our best to ignore them as much as possible as women. What is this resulting in? This is resulting in not only misdiagnoses by the medical community, but women starting to wonder if they are being gaslit themselves, convincing themselves of symptoms that aren't really there or that aren't that severe in pain. She reports that one woman said to her, "Surely all these doctors couldn't be wrong. After all, they were the experts." So what does this all mean? It means that too many women are feeling invisible in front of their own doctors, in front of the people that we are claiming as experts. Women are feeling as though they're being met with skepticism or even downright disrespect, like we've seen in Jamie's case. And they're made to feel like they're crazy for even thinking about alternative possibilities to pharmaceuticals or surgery as the first line of treatment. She goes on in her book to have this whole section, which really blew my mind, and it's called Being a Woman is Not a Disease. In here, she talks about how most gynecological conditions or menstrual conditions go unrecognized and dismissed. The medical professionals have led us to believe that our bodies are lemons, machines that chronically break down, that disease is inevitable, and that the only real solution or right answers are pharmaceuticals, surgeries, and other invasive interventions, and that science always trumps nature. She goes on even further to give these incredible points and statistics. First one being that 50% of all birth control pills are not prescribed as contraceptions, but are prescribed for menstrual pain and problems as a first line of option. Second, she shares that 1 in 4 women is now on an antidepressant, one of the most common treatments for PMS. Yet only about half of all the women benefit from this treatment, and few are warned about the side effects, resulting in a lot of misdiagnosed mental health diagnoses. Third point she shares is that fertility medicine is projected to be a $41 billion industry in 2026, and that companies like Facebook and Apple offer egg freezing as a perk to their employees, selling the idea that fertility might not be something that you can bank on in the future. Fourth point she shares is that menopause has also been medically manipulated and treated like a disease since the 1950s. She goes on to say that 1 in 3 women are having hysterectomies in their lifetime in the US, which is much higher than any European country. This is another example of the gross over-medicalization of women's bodies. And then she goes on to saying that while 70% of all pharmaceuticals are prescribed to women, most have never even been tested on a woman. Differences in how we metabolize medication puts us at a much higher risk for adverse events compared to men. So what does this mean? This just goes to show how deeply ingrained this is in our society and how we are being manipulated and taught that our bodies are unreliable, when in fact they are so incredibly reliable, and that our bodies are built and designed to constantly be in balance and to achieve balance. So what's happening is we're being taught to ignore our inner compass. We're not being given the tools to know our rhythm and what the rhythm means and how we can decode it so that we can live in harmony, so that we can live pain-free, so that we can remain curious and inspired, and so that we can live in alignment with our hormones. Our hormones are here to help us so that we can constantly be navigating our body and constantly be in a rhythm where we're experiencing new strengths in a very cyclical nature. But what's happening is we're being trained to think that it's taboo to talk about our vaginas, our clitoris, our discharge, our menstrual cycles, our vaginal bleeding. We're being taught to not talk about anything that's going on in our body because it's uncomfortable for men or for the general population to know. What has blown my mind on this journey is as I've deepened into my own body and understanding it, how receptive the men in my life are to hearing about it, how receptive my friends' husbands are to have these conversations. This isn't as uncomfortable or shameful as I think we've been taught or led to believe. Now, don't get me wrong. It still exists. There's some people that get really grossed out about it, but this is why we have to start changing the dialogue. This is why we have to start talking about it differently. And so bringing this full circle now into how this has helped create a sisterhood wound is we feel it in our body that something's out of balance, but we don't feel like we can share it. And so we keep pushing through.
we say, I can't let anyone else know. And so when somebody else declares that they're in pain, our brain automatically goes to this place of going, is it really that bad? Having these same conversations or inflicting the same self-doubt onto other women that we have been inflicted with. Somehow we think along the way that, we've been told that we need to minimize it. We've been told that you got to push through. We've been told you can't talk about it. And so we expect other women to follow that exact same norm. And my whole purpose, my dream, my desire is for all of us to start talking about it. For all of us to make this conversation. And it's scary. I won't lie. It is scary. I teach this stuff. I talk about this stuff. But when I'm put in a situation where I'm uncertain of how it will be received by the group, I minimize what I do for work. I minimize what my passion is. I make sure that everyone else is comfortable versus just really being real. And so how we start to heal the sisterhood wound is by talking. We heal the sisterhood wound by listening and watching our sisters and reading what might be going on for them. When we see that someone is, snappy, you can see that they're in pain, or maybe they're just really run down and exhausted. Understanding our own cyclical health and our own rhythm, we can probably tap into going, oh, you know what, I bet you they're close to their menstruation. What can I do to help them? What can I do to offload them or to let them know that they are seen and what they're feeling is okay and that I'm here to help because I'm in a different phase of my cycle? How beautiful would it be if we lived in a world where as women, we could hold space for whatever is going on with other women in our life? This is the way it used to be centuries ago. Red tents existed as a way for women to hold space for women. Women would gather in the red tent not only so that they could rest and nurture and be cared for, but as a way to be within the community of other women, speaking truth, being real, and acknowledging the bleed with one another. And so how magical would that be if we could bring that back into modern day life in some form? To hold the red tent energy, even if it was metaphorically. What would it look like in our workplace if we went in and said, it's the new moon and there's probably a majority of the women here are bleeding? So you know what? How can I create the energetic space to say, I see you, I'm giving you space. I'm not going to knock on your door and demand that this has to be done ASAP or ask you to go and take over a meeting and to public speak. Or how beautiful would it be if we knew the inner seasons so well and we were aligned with the cycle of the moon, and that we could carry that wisdom and watch our other sisters and meet their needs and know that nothing would be lost by taking care of ourselves, that there is a season for everything, and that by breaking in our winter or our late fall, by taking that time to just slow down and really be within that energy, that inwardness, how much more we could be effective and propel ourselves into our spring and our summer, our outer seasons, to really be able to shine and to show up and to get the things done that we weren't able to get done the week before. This is all very possible. It's just a different way of doing it. It makes me kind of think actually of Central America and the siestas. They don't worry that they take a nap midday. They just know they need to. And yet they get stuff still done. Society still runs. They're all still very productive in their lives. And it just goes to show that how much of that kind of mentality affects our wellness and our health. I met a woman this summer who was from Mexico and who specializes in women's health and in abdominal massage. And they start this discussion right at puberty, and they do daily self-care on the womb. And she was sharing that in these villages that she has worked in, that she has been mentored in by other aunties, they don't have C-sections. They don't have menstrual conditions. They don't have endometriosis or fibroids. And it's because they know their landscape. They take care of their body and they meet their seasons where they need to meet. So healing our bodies is also healing this bigger sisterhood wound of believing the women who tell the stories of what they're experiencing, of not minimizing, but actually holding space for women who are going through pain or discomfort, who have bad PMS, who have painful menstruations, or are on a journey of trying to heal bigger conditions. Healing the sisterhood wound is about seeing that this is real and believing it is real and demanding better care amongst each other, better care in our workplaces, better care by our doctors. This is us demanding that we operate differently because of our hormonal makeup. And in return, we expect to be met with a different way, a new way. Let's try something new and see if it works, because it did work centuries ago. So, how to live a womb-led life piece of advice this week. My little wisdom drop for you would be, look at how you're treating your own menstrual cycle and how you're caring for yourself. And then reflect upon how that plays into your expectations that you have for other women. And this coming month, this next cycle, I invite you just to keep eyes wide open and look at the women in your life and just watch for when they might need a little extra help or when you can see that their energy is dipped. How can you meet them in their cycle and give them the environment or help support the environment so that they can thrive in whatever season they're in? So that is your homework. Watch, listen, and see how you can change, how you show up in your own cycle and in the cycle for other women.
For way too long, as women, we have been guided to hate our menstrual cycle and to curse our hormones. We have lost the art of seeing the inner power of being cyclical. So, if this podcast is inspiring you and waking up a new curiosity of how your cycle can be your superpower, I invite you to check out the She Sisterhood. This is a monthly membership that will align you to your unique rhythm through aligned womb yoga practices, cycle coaching on how to weave your cycle wisdom into everyday life, and to be part of a community of women that are awakening to their inner power. Remember, womb wisdom equals connection to self, which ultimately equals inspired living. And if you love this episode, don't forget to rate and review. I love seeing how this information is transforming your life.